Let's see. How did you end up working for NASA?
Well, whenever I graduated from college, they had people coming out hiring people, for different companies, and I put in a request to interview 7 different companies.
Whoa.
And at that time, they were really hiring a lot of people. And so the first 6 different companies that I interviewed, I asked them one question for sure was, if I worked for you, what would I be doing? And most of them said something, oh well, you would have this part you would be working on, and trying to get it to work right, and it may take a while to get it to work right, and all this is definitely not too interesting to me. Some of them weren't. But then this NASA guy comes in. He turned out to be my new boss in Cleveland, and he just happened to be interviewing me. And I asked him the same question. He says, "Well, Larry," he says, "we probably have you designing test hardware for the wind tunnels there." And but he said, "Really, from one day to the next, it's hard to know what you'd be doing."
Oh.
As things change so fast.
Oh, uh-huh.
And I said, that sounds like it might be an interesting place to work.
Oh.
And it was the lowest paying job I was offered.
Okay. But it was the most interesting.
Most interesting, yes.
Uh-huh. And you just graduated with aerospace engineering?
Yes.
Ah, in the 60s, early 60s, I think.
I was in 63.
Okay.
And I arrived there, and matter of fact, it was in the fall of 62 whenever he interviewed me, and then I actually reported for work in February of 63. On February the 4th.
And you're like, I have to move to where?
Half of what?
Have to move to Cleveland?
Yeah. Well, I'd never been to Cleveland before in my life. I
Right.
think we drove through Cleveland one time going to Maine. We
Oh.
went to visit my aunt and uncle in Maine.
Oh.
But we just kind of drove through. We didn't stop. That's the only time I'd ever been there. The only person I knew in Cleveland at the time was a pastor whose son I went to school with.
Oh.
And he was a Lutheran church pastor in North Olmsted.
Uh-huh.
And whenever I found out I was going there, I got his phone number and called him, and told him I was coming up there. He says, "Oh, great, Larry." He says, "Tell you what," he says, "you come to my house when you get here, and we'll put you up the first night for sure, and then I'll find a place for you to stay till you can find a regular place to stay."
Uh-huh.
And so I stayed at his house the first night. And then he had talked to a member of his congregation in the meantime, and she had an attic room on her house that was not being used.
Oh.
And so she invited me to stay there for a week or two.
Oh, that's nice.
So I stayed in her house for about 2 weeks, and then I got into this with these 2 guys in this up and down condo that they had. 2 of them were living there, and they needed a third person to help make the rent.
Oh, well, that's nice.
And so I ended up working with Herbie, and can't remember the other guy's name now, but Herbie I remember.
Uh-huh.
Until I got married.
Then you had a new roommate.
And what?
A new roommate.
Yeah, well, then I had a new roommate, right? Yeah.